Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is quite a long one, guys. It's a 7-part series, brand new from a fantastic author by the name of Girl from the Crypt. As ever, please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. And so, without further ado, let's get into tonight's story, entitled I live on a farm out in the sticks. There are some strange creatures roaming our patch of land. Part 1. Let's get straight into that. Stop struggling, I ordered as I strapped my older brother down to the stretcher. His arms were flailing about, making it hard for me to fasten the belts around his wrists. Can't we do this tomorrow or something? I don't really... Shh, shut up, I interrupted him. If we don't do it now, it's just going to keep growing. We've done this before, remember? I smiled as he finally gave in. He looked at me with pleading eyes. Just get it over with. I pulled up his shirt, exposing his stomach. Whoa, Ben, I commented. What? My brother asked curtly. It's nothing. But you could stand to lose a few pounds. Maybe then you'd be less attractive as a host for parasites. Just do it, he bellowed. I shrugged and bent down. I pinched the skin around his belly button between my fingers, and then I waited. After a few seconds, something pale appeared inside his navel. I grinned triumphantly. I quickly grabbed a large pair of tweezers from the small table next to the stretcher. Here it comes, I exclaimed happily. I captured the thing between the tweezers and began pulling. My brother let out a howl of pain as the first 5 inches of the thin worm emerged from his belly button. My fingers cramped around the tweezers. I continued to tug at it with all of my strength. And finally, the last few inches of the worm slid out and I dropped the writhing mess onto the floor. I stomped at it a few times until I was certain it was dead. I looked up at my brother, who was still shaking and panting heavily. Beads of sweat mixed with tears of pain were streaming down his face. I picked up the wet towel I kept on the table beside the stretcher and gently dabbed his face with it before wiping the sweat off my own forehead. I began cleaning the area around his navel, the skin around which had turned soft and pink. I put a large band-aid over it and gestured for my brother to sit up. He did so, albeit very slowly. Does it hurt a lot? I inquired. Well, the worst part is over. Still, I wish these things would just stay away from me. You should really take better care of yourself. Your hygiene, that is. Shower more often, and wash your hands before eating. You know that's how they get in, I explained as I helped him to his feet. Ben, my older brother, now stands at an impressive 7'1" already, even though he hasn't stopped growing yet. He does all these tough things, like chopping wood and hunting. I call him strong fat when I'm mad at him. And yet, this giant of a 17-year-old screams like a baby when being operated on. I get that having a 2-foot-long worm pulled out of your navel isn't the most pleasant thing to experience, but his howls are an unsettling reminder that he too is only human. I smiled up at him and he looked back at me with a scowl. I feel like you're enjoying these procedures way too much, he grunted. Well, someone has to do it though. Plus, I like pretending that I'm a doctor, I replied. I know that's not going to happen in real life, but I can at least enjoy imagining it, I added with a hint of sadness. Ben sighed. Oh, God, now you're making me feel bad. I'm sorry we have to homeschool you. You know, I'd like you to go school in the city, but it's just too far away and we don't have any money either. It's okay, I interrupted him. You can still be our doctor though. Remember how you stitched up Dad's leg when he was bitten by that dog? That was awesome. Like, honestly, we'd be screwed without you. I smiled. Oh, stop it. You don't have to comfort me. I'm serious. I'm sorry I'm always getting all squeamish. I really trust you though. You always know what you're doing. How about we go downstairs and have some cake or something? Sound good? He asked. I just pulled a worm out of your belly. You can't eat now. How can you even feel hungry after something like this? My stomach just feels really empty right now, he replied with a shrug. Both of us burst out laughing and I followed him down the stairs into the kitchen. I sat down at the table and Ben went off to get the cake from the box in the pantry. The cake box is a beautiful wooden pink box I found down at the creek about 2 years ago. When I first found it, it was empty. I had taken it home with me that day because it was so pretty. But when I showed it to Ben, and we took another look inside, we found a large round chocolate cake in it. To this day, neither of us know how the cake box works. The only thing we know is that every month a new cake spawns inside of it. And it's never the same cake twice. One time it was a cheesecake, the next time it was a shortcake. Another time the box was filled to the brim with cookies. We've never questioned the magic behind this wonderful item, but it amazes us time and time again. Ben came back and sat the box down on a table. He reached inside and produced what looked like a strawberry cupcake, which he placed in front of me. He took out one for himself and we quietly began eating. The cake box was just about the only good thing I'd ever found while playing at the creek. I did find 2 other items, namely an old shoe and a severed human arm. I tried to take the latter home to show my brother, but shortly before I could reach our porch, one of the goats came charging at me, ripped the arm out of my hand, and ran off with it. I'm not exactly sure what he did with the arm afterwards, but I have a hunch it ate it. The sound of the raindrops hitting the ground outside broke the silence, and Ben rose to his feet. I noticed that he was limping slightly. His stomach probably still hurt, and he staggered over to the window and looked outside. "It's getting dark out there," he murmured. "Probably going to have a thunderstorm any minute." "Should I go check the chicken coop?" I asked. Chickens tend to get a little bit scared during thunderstorms. "No need. They can just go inside their little house. The chicken's coop locked, so I don't think any of them are going to try and wander off." He turned around to face me and let out a long sigh. "Go get your brother." I nodded, got up and headed upstairs to my little brother's room. I gently opened the door and slid inside. My baby brother's room was always laying in total darkness. He doesn't like any light shining through the blinds when he sleeps, so we nailed the window shut a while ago. He doesn't like night lights either, and we made it a rule not to turn on the lamp. Stuff like that startles the little guy. Careful not to bump into anything, I felt my way over to his playpen. Finally, my hands touched its wooden surface, and I felt the familiar bite marks in it. My little brother Jerry had been teething early, and as soon as the first few tusks had pierced his gums, he had started gnawing on everything he could find. One time, he got cocky and tried chewing on Ben's leg. I remember the dumbfounded look on the infant's face when Ben picked him up and very gently bit into his own leg. It didn't hurt him, of course. He just did it to teach him a lesson. And that's very important with kids like that. Today you let them chew on you once, with no consequences, and tomorrow they'll be out there ripping people's throats out. I reached around into the playpen and fumbled around in it, searching for the familiar warm little body. As soon as my fingers touched his head, I wrapped my arms around him and lifted him up out of the pen. Jerry let out a confused grunt, and I could feel his tiny little fingers reach out to touch my face. I made for the door and went back downstairs where Ben was waiting on the living room couch. "There's the little guy," he said cheerfully as he reached out to take Jerry from me. "So, what's going on outside?" I asked as I plopped down next to him. Just a thunderstorm, albeit a bad one. Rain's getting heavier too. We might just have to..." The sound of our doorbell ringing interrupted him. "Okay, that's weird," Ben murmured. He sat Jerry down on the floor and he immediately scuttled off. Great, I thought. Now he'll go and raid the pantry. Ben took the shotgun off the wall and walked over to the door. I followed close behind. The doorbell rang again, and then one more time. Whoever was waiting outside was getting frantic. Ben cocked the shotgun. As soon as he opened the door, he took aim. I was still standing behind him, and his bulky frame was obscuring my view. And finally, he stepped aside, only for me to find that there was no one there. My brother and I exchanged confused glances. "Strange," I muttered. Suddenly, something on the ground caught my eye. It was a small piece of paper. I nudged my brother, and he bent down to pick it up. He closed the door and held the paper out to me so we could both read and have a look at it. And even though it was almost completely soaked, the words written on it in black ink were still legible. Ben and I swallowed it in unison as we read what it said. "I have come for the infant." "Jerry!" I screamed. Ben and I immediately ran off into different directions to look for him. I sprinted back to the living room, then up to the stairs, praying for my little brother to still be there somewhere. "I got him!" I suddenly heard my brother shout from the kitchen. I dashed downstairs to find Jerry safe in Ben's arms and let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God. Ben, what do we do now? What do we do?" I panted. My older brother frowned, thinking feverishly. "I have no idea." We decided it would be best to never leave Jerry's side from now on. The three of us returned to the living room where we plopped down on the couch. I had taken a note with me to examine it some more, but no matter how often I let my eyes wander over the words on the wet paper, the nauseating feeling of dread in my stomach stayed the same. Ben was still in deep thought, quietly cradling the baby in his arms. Jerry, blissfully oblivious to the danger he was in, had fallen asleep. Do you think it's really him?" Ben finally spoke up. "Who else would it be? No one else knows. And I doubt Mum's playing a prank on us. We knew this day would come, eventually." My voice trailed off. Ben nodded. "Oh, Mum, what have you done?" he muttered under his breath. Maybe this is a good time to explain a few things. My name is Phoebe Johnson. I am 12 years old and I live with my two siblings, Benjamin and Jerry Johnson, 17 years and 13 months respectively, on a small farm quite literally in the middle of nowhere. My mother, Susanna Blanche Johnson, comes by once or twice a week to check up on us and help us at the farm. We do not know where she spends the rest of her time. My father, Arlo Johnson, left after he found out that my mother had cheated on him, and we haven't heard from him in over a year. Now, the thing with Jerry is that he is the result of Susanna Blanche cheating on her husband. I love my little brother dearly, and I don't blame him for anything, but I sometimes wish my mother had cheated on my father with another human being. But apparently her marriage with Arlo had not only caused her to become bored of him, but of the entire human race. We found out when Jerry was born, he came out with soft bits of fur all over his body, 2 tiny horns on his head, hooves for feet, and eyes glowing like embers. I still remember Dad throwing his shoe at Mum, calling her a supernatural tramp. And 2 days later, Dad was gone. He left a note pinned to my bedpost that read, "To my 2 children, Phoebe and Benjamin, I love you very much, but not enough to put up with this crap. Goodbye." I miss him sometimes. We had to sell our cows because there was no way we could handle them with Arlo gone. We did manage to keep up with the rest of the farm though. The goats, the chickens, the bunnies and the fields. Our land is very small, just small enough for us to handle it, doing all the work. Ben takes care of the crops, I take care of the animals, and it's been that way ever since. We make enough money off it to get by, and when Mum comes over, she takes most of the stuff we've harvested with her and sells it to whoever she goes to when she's away. And then she comes back a few days later and gives us the money. We've asked her a couple of times about Jerry's father, but she would only ever give us a small scrap of information. From what we could piece together though, he was some kind of forest creature, and not a very friendly one. Of course, we never met him. Mum gave us a few hints that maybe he would try and reach out to his son at some point and to watch out for him. We adore Jerry. He's the sweetest little thing, and we are not going to let anyone take him away from us. But now that this day has come, we were scared, especially since we had no idea what we were dealing with. I think that what was the most unsettling to my older brother, Benjamin, has always done everything he could to protect us, and he usually succeeded. And he's strong, like really strong. He had been strong enough to fend off a rabid wolf when he was just 13. He had been strong enough to kill the thing that had eaten our chickens when he was 15. And we still don't know what that creature was, but it stood over 6'5", and its skin and fur currently adorn the living room floor serving the purpose of a carpet. But what use was strength and courage when the thing you're going to fight could literally be anything? I watched as my brother kept cradling the infant. The rain outside kept getting heavier, and the wind was howling and thunder crashing in the distance. "Phoebe, go check if all the windows are shut, would you? I don't want the rain getting in," Ben murmured. I simply nodded, made my way over to the kitchen. Both windows were closed. I looked outside to see the yard lay in darkness. I had never seen anything like this before. Thunderstorms around here can get pretty nasty, but this time, the heavy rain clouds had seemingly blocked out all of the light. How was that possible? Had I not known it was noon, I would have thought it was nighttime. I looked out onto the small field, and I frowned. Was there someone next to the scarecrow? I had to strain my eyes to make out the dark silhouette against the grey sky, and yet, the longer I looked at it, the more convinced I became. Someone was standing beside the scarecrow. My fingers trembling, I closed the curtains. "Ben," I called. "I think there's someone out in the field." "It's probably just the scarecrow. Go close to the windows," my brother shouted back. "No, it's right next to the scarecrow. Just close the other windows already. We'll see about it then." I swallowed and walked upstairs into the bathroom. The small window was wide open, and the windowsill and the floor below it were splashed with rainwater. I shut the window and quickly dried the rain off with a towel before I made my way into the master bedroom. When Dad was still around, he and Mum would sleep in there. Mum is the only one who ever really uses it now, and she only uses it so when she stays overnight. But we still keep it clean, just in case. I went over to the window. It was shut. I closed the blinds and turned around, but just before I could step out of the door, I heard something strange. The sound of fingernails tapping against the glass. It came from outside. I was surprised I could even hear it at all through the wind's howls and the rain's steady pattering, but it was such a distinct, out-of-place sound that I just couldn't help but notice. On any other day, I would have written it off as just a twig hid in the window pane, but I was on edge. I was so incredibly nervous that even a seemingly insignificant sound like that made me jump. I slowly turned back around to face the window, and there it was again. The tapping grew louder, more frantic. This wasn't a twig. It wasn't just raindrops either. I swallowed and inched closer to the window. Should I? I reached out and, with a jerk, I pulled open the blinds, just in time to see an obscure face quickly vanish out of sight. I gasped and hurried to open the window. I stuck my head into the cold, windy air outside. My face was instantly hit with thick, icy raindrops. I looked around, but there was nothing there. I shut the window and wiped the rain off my face. I was on the second floor, and nobody could just look in the window and then disappear, just like that. Yet, I was certain I had seen a face pressed up against the glass from the other side. Had I just been seeing things? I decided that now wasn't the time to question my mental state. I rushed downstairs and back into the living room. My brother looked beyond confused, seeing me barge in. I must have looked like I completely lost it. I began stammering together an explanation of what I'd seen, but even I noticed I was talking way too fast for him to understand anything. He had stood up and opened his mouth as if he was about to say something, but was cut off by the distinct sound of glass shattering upstairs. "He got in," I whispered, knowing well that I was only stating the obvious, but needing a confirmation that this was not a bad dream. Both of us fell silent and raised our eyes to the ceiling as loud, heavy footsteps sounded from above our heads. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Ben pressed a finger onto his lips, gesturing for me to be quiet, and handed me my still sleeping baby brother. I wrapped my arms around Jerry, and Ben grabbed his shotgun. "Get out," he mouthed. I nodded. I knew better than to ask questions. I snuck over to the front door, opened it, and slid outside. I glanced behind me before closing the door again, and Ben wasn't following me. Instead, he glared at me and motioned for me to get going. I clutched Jerry even tighter, finding comfort in the warmth of his brown, fluffy fur. Forcing myself to turn my back on my brother, I started running down the path that led to the creek. mud splashing up from where my feet hit the ground, and behind me, the sound of gunshots rang out into the darkness. When I finally reached the creek, I began to calm down a little. The creek is far enough away from the house to be a safe space. Plus, it's my favourite place for a reason. Nothing bad has ever happened to me while playing there. I'm not sure why, but even though I have found weird things there, from time to time, the place feels sacred. This is also where my dad got baptized. I laid Jerry down on a bit of moss by the water, and he was still fast asleep. Inferno wouldn't wake up this child. I sat down next to him and said over to the house. It was too far away to make out anything, but I thought I could still see a faint light in the windows. I waited. Would Ben come to get me? Should I go back? The more time passed, the more nervous I became. Looking over at Jerry, I couldn't help but wonder what monstrosity Ben was facing in there. I began to count in my head. It's a good strategy to soothe one's nerves, and to know what time is when one doesn't have a watch with them. I counted to 1800 before it started to feel like my head was going to explode. 1800 seconds. That would mean about half an hour had gone by. I couldn't hold myself back anymore, and by then, whatever happened had already happened. I had to go back. What else was I supposed to do? I grabbed Jerry, waking him up in a process. He looked at me confusedly, probably wondering where he was, and holding him in my arms, I began marching back towards the farmhouse, away from the creek and past the field. The ever-growing feeling of dread caused my stomach to churn, and as I stepped onto the porch, I found the door to our home wide open, warm light flooding out from inside. "Ben?" I called out, my voice trembling. No reply. Instead, I heard a loud scream coming from the barn. I spun around, but I wasn't scared. It wasn't Ben screaming. I think I mentioned it before, but my older brother screams like a little girl. My own scream sounds deeper than his. This voice, however, it didn't sound human at all. I ran towards the barn and pushed open a gate, and what I saw is something I don't think I'll ever forget. The barn was only illuminated by Ben's enormous flashlight, which he had placed on the ground, facing him and it. Benjamin was bent over a creature I can hardly describe. It was tied up and unable to move. It looked vaguely human. It was tall enough and the shape was about right, but everything else was utterly wrong. Its muscular body was covered in thick brown fur. Its arms and chest looked human, but on its neck sat the head of a ram, complete with large round horns. It had the inverted legs of a horse or goat and hooves for feet. And even though its face was utterly alien, I could clearly see that it was scared and in pain too. Upon approaching the two of them, I could also see why. Ben was holding one of the creature's hands. Its hand had a large punctual wound in it, similarly inflicted by the hunting knife Ben was holding in his other hand. The blade was still smeared with blood, and Ben had a look of blind rage on his face. I coughed, and the both of them turned around to face me. My brother's expression immediately softened up upon seeing me, and a triumphant smile appeared on his lips. "Phoebe, there you are. I'm sorry I didn't come to get you. I was afraid our friend here would run off if I left. I knew you'd come back soon enough, though. It's time for you to meet our special guest," Ben declared. I looked down at the thing on the ground in front of him. Is that him? Yep, this is Jerry's father. Phoebe, meet Franco. Franco, meet Phoebe. I was just in the process of making him explain himself. He turned back to look at the creature. Breaking into people's houses, scaring little girls? We aren't very well-mannered, are we? I'm sorry. What am I supposed to do? You were aiming a shotgun at me, the brute screeched. I gasped. I hadn't expected him to start talking, and Ben seemed less than surprised. I said stop talking nonsense, my brother shouted, and then, a little calmer, he added, You had this coming, buddy. With that, he raised the knife and brought it down on the creature's hand, piercing through the very same wound from before. The thing let out an unearthly scream as it threw its head back in pain. Jerry looked up and gave a happy little gurgle, clapping his tiny hands, and Ben roughly pulled out the knife. "Oh my God, make it stop!" the beast whined. Sorry, Franco, but I guess I gotta knock some sense into you, Ben replied, not sounding very apologetic. Franco turned to look at me. You're Phoebe, right? You guys are Susie's other children. I've been watching you ever since my son was born. Figured as much, you little creep, Ben roared, grabbing him by one of his horns and slightly lifting him from the ground. How about I go get my saw and get one of those big boys off your head? No, please don't, Franco cried out. He then glanced back at me again. Miss Phoebe, please, you have to understand. All I ever wanted to say was hi to my son. I didn't mean to scare you. I cocked my head to the side. You don't want to take him away from us? No, Franco yelled. I'd never. You guys like him. You take care of him. I just wanted to meet him. I never did anything to harm you. Your brother is a fucking psycho. He just shot at me, and when I tried to defend myself, he beat me to mush and tied me up in here. Look at what he's done to my hand. I have 2 kids on a farm to protect here, Ben hollered, raising his knife once again. Wait, I chimed in before the blade could sink into the creature's flesh again. About 10 minutes later, the 4 of us sat in our kitchen. Franco, who had plopped down on the floor, was casually playing with Jerry, happy smiles on both of their faces. I had bandaged his hand as best as I could and was now sitting next to a still, rather flustered Ben. My older brother had leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed and a deep frown on his face. Apparently, my proposal to stick to the Geneva Convention had insulted him a bit. But Franco, there's still a few things I don't understand. Why did you leave when I tried looking out the window? I asked. I don't know. You suddenly looked kind of scary, so I bowed out. I'm sorry. I'm stupid. And why did you break in upstairs? I inquired. That's literally the main reason why we got so spooked. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I came through the door, you'd immediately shoot me. Thought I could sneak into Jerry's room without you guys noticing. I didn't know you had him downstairs with you. Oh God, I'm really sorry. That was the worst approach one could take, and I took it like a dimwit I am, Franco replied, clearly embarrassed. It's okay. One more thing though. Why did you leave that creepy note on our doorstep? Franco looked up at me. Note? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't leave any notes. I can't even write. I live on a farm out in the sticks, and there are some strange creatures roaming our patch of land. Part 2. Let's get straight into that. A fun thing to know is that when Ben gets angry, he starts speaking with an accent. So when I woke up this morning to him screaming at someone outside, the first thing I thought was, oh no, he's gone southern. I sat up to listen a little closer. He must have been standing right outside. His voice sounded like it was coming from the porch. He was yelling at someone, and that's when it began to sink in. Who was he arguing with? Ben is not the type to talk to himself. He'd never scream at Jerry either. He and Franco had made peace later that previous night too, and by the time the goat man left, they had gotten pretty friendly. Even though Ben had warned him he wouldn't drop his guard around him. Not Jerry, not Franco, not me. So who was he screaming at? I quickly slid out of bed and got dressed before hurrying downstairs. The closer I got, the louder my brother's voice became. No, man, you're going nowhere near her. You made your decision. I'm not going to forget that. Now get off my property before I make you. I heard another voice reply, but it was too low for me to understand. I heard my brother grunt, and then the door slammed. I was still standing atop of the staircase when he turned around and strode off. Goddamn son of a... He grumbled and jumped a little as he looked up just in time before he could finish the obscenity. My God, Phoebe! Damn, you startled me. I didn't see you up there. Who was that at the door? I asked. Nobody. Nobody important. You don't need to know. I made pancakes. Go get them while they're still warm, my brother replied, clearly dodging my question. His accent had faded away by now, and he was talking normally again. As soon as he turned his back to me, I dashed down the stairs to look out the window overlooking the field. I was just in time to see a horse trotting off. The man on its back was facing away from me, so I couldn't make out any of his features. I decided I would ask Ben about it again later. I went back to going over my daily routine. First I had breakfast, then I went outside to do the dirty work waiting for me in the goat shed. Afterwards, I collected the eggs from the chicken coop and then stayed out for a while to play with the bunnies. When I went back inside, I could hear the TV blaring, and so I went over into the living room to check up on Ben. He sat slumped over on the couch, holding a can of beer, but wasn't really paying any attention to the TV, nor to his drink. Instead, he simply stared down at the floor. When he noticed I had entered, he looked up at me. His gaze was gloomy and dull. I was taken aback. I had not seen him like this in a long time. "Phoebe," he said, his voice low and husky. "You're happy here, right?" "Of course." My brother cleared his throat. "And you wouldn't want to leave either, would you?" "Leave? Where would I go? This is my home. I'm not going anywhere." He smiled softly. "Good, that's good, because I'd be very sad with you gone." I grimaced. That was weird. "Are you okay?" I asked. He chuckled. Yeah, I'm fine, sorry. It's just, I've been thinking, and if you were gone, I'd be all alone. Of course I'd still have Jerry, but Jerry won't stitch me up when I'm injured. Chances are he'll eat me when I'm dead. But the two of us are a team. We always were. I never understood how siblings could hate each other. I was so happy when you were born. You were adorable. The first thing you ever said was my name. You were like, Ben, 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 Ben. And it was the cutest thing I'd ever seen. So, whatever you do, please, don't abandon us. I was dumbfounded. I won't, I replied. I don't really get it, though. What are you... He turned up the TV volume before I could finish my sentence. A little later, with all my chores done, I decided I would go outside and play. Ben had taken Jerry out of his playpen and was keeping him busy downstairs watching some children's show with him. I told him I'd be back in a few hours and then basically dashed through the door. I headed straight for the woods. The woods adjoining our fields are amazing. There's just no other way to describe them. They're lush and beautiful, but only by day. At night time, things get a little unsafe in there. This is also why I've never been allowed to stay out by myself after dark. That's when the unpleasant fellows come out. I've seen quite a lot of strange things happen here. When I was really little, around 4 or 5 years old, my father Arlo and his buddies were hunting a bear that had been seen roaming the area around the farms, including ours. Normally, this wouldn't have been much to worry about, but the bear had begun to get closer and closer to the actual houses. One of my dad's friends, I think his name was Cletus, even swore up and down he had seen the animal look inside through a window one night while he was in bed. The bear kept showing up, and when Arlo first saw him, he thought it had rabies. It had foam at the mouth, and its fur was matted and dirty. Arlo and his friends planned on killing the animal before it could spread the disease or attack their livestock. They chased it away from the farms and shot at it non-stop, from a safe distance, of course. But, no matter how many bullets it took, it just wouldn't die. It got pretty close to my father at some point, and that's when he saw that the bear's eyes were red. They had a demonic glow to them, making my father, a grown man, almost piss his pants. At least that's how he relayed it to me. They eventually did manage to kill it, but when they tried to move its corpse, one of the men accidentally touched the foam at the animal's mouth. The foam immediately began burning into his skin like acid, and he had to be brought to a hospital in the city. Another time, Susanna Blanche, my mum, had brought Ben and me out to the fields to play hide and seek. Arlo had told us we shouldn't because we'd only trample down the crops, but she insisted because, in her mind, it would be really fun. It was fun indeed, until we lost Ben. We couldn't find him anywhere, and it was starting to get dark. Mum and I kept calling for him to come out and that the game was over, and we got no reply until we noticed movement in the field a bit further away from us. As we approached, we could hear Ben shout out to us. We found him wrestling an alien-looking creature. The thing was black all over and looked a bit like a very small deer, but instead of 4 legs, it had 8. We were scared and attempted to help him, but Ben, who seemed utterly calm, told us to stay away. We stood next to him, and first thing, both of us completely dumbfounded, watching as my brother pinned it to the ground and broke one of its legs. The breaking bone made a disgusting crunching sound, and the thing screeched in pain. Ben then simply stood up and let it scuttle off into the distance, as best as it could. My brother never really bragged about it, but when that creature was out of sight, he just apologised for having kept us waiting and said he'd like to play some more. When I asked him about it, he said the thing just came charging at him when he was wandering about, and he simply defended himself. In hindsight, it probably is a bit strange for a kid to react like that, especially since he was just 11 years old at the time. To return to what happened today, I was walking around aimlessly. When I'm in the woods, I'm always on the lookout for things that might be useful or interesting. I have already found a few strange plants in there, and whenever I find something cool, I take it home with me to examine and preserve. One time I found a beautiful pale flower that looked like a rose had morphed with a lily. I picked it and went home with it, where I put it in a vase. When it got dark and I turned off the light to go to bed, I noticed that the flower was glowing. I must have sat there for around 2 hours, just staring at the petal's soft, white light. Ever since then, I've been hoping to find something like that again, and so as always, I kept my eyes open as I was wandering around. Suddenly, I heard something, a frail, weak whimper coming from somewhere near me. I looked around, and there it was again. I listened intently, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. "Help me! Help!" I spun around. It was the voice of a woman, weak and frightened. It was close. I rounded a few bushes, and the whining got louder. I staggered further into the woods, following the sobs. I don't know what came over me, knowing where I was and what could be lurking here. I should have been more careful. Maybe the bright sunlight shining through the leaves of the trees made me feel just a little bit too safe, or maybe it was the pain in the woman's voice coaxing me into her direction. And what if someone really needed help? You hear about people going on hikes and never coming back because they fell or broke their legs or something, and no one ever found them all the time. Ignoring all of my cautionary instincts, I proceeded into the direction the voice was coming from. I ended up on a small clearing, looking around. I could still see no one. I was just beginning to doubt my initial decision of following the voice when I heard it again. It sounded rather cheerful now. "Up here!" I looked up and my blood ran cold. There she was. Her face and torso were normal enough. She would have seemed like a completely innocent person if it weren't for her arms and legs to be grossly out of proportions. They looked to be about 4 times the length they should be, and had far too many joints. She had wrapped them around the branches of the treetops, propping herself up above my head. She looked like a human spider. The sight was grotesque. She threw her head back and let out a loud, high-pitched cackle. I started running. I knew she was after me. I heard her move through the trees above, an ungainly and yet an impressive speed. The one thing that kept her from catching up to me was the fact that I knew exactly where I was going. I had been in these woods more times than I can count. I knew which way to get out. Cursing my own stupidity with every step I took, I dashed out onto the fields in horror. I noticed how far away I was from the farm. She was still behind me, cackling as she went. She let herself fall to the ground, landing on all fours. I began sprinting towards the farmhouse, the woman following close behind. Within mere seconds, it was clear that she would catch up to me very soon. While I had to struggle to move through the wheat, she was running after me like she was on stilts, unhindered by the tall crops. I was out of breath and panting heavily. I began to stumble. "This is it," I thought as I felt myself falling. "I'm gonna die here." I was sure I could feel the beast's hot breath on my neck when suddenly a gunshot rang out right behind me. The monster let out a pained howl, another gunshot, and the thing hissed like a snake. I didn't care to look. "Get the fuck away from my kid!" I knew that voice. It was calm, confident, deep and husky. But it couldn't be. I hadn't heard it in what felt like ages. Another gunshot, another snarl from the creature. "I said scram!" A hiss, and then 2 more gunshots, and the thing fell dead to the ground. I slowly rolled over and sat up. Sitting atop the same white horse I had watched through the window that same morning was him. I felt my eyes well up. I can't really remember him getting off the horse and lifting me into his arms. Maybe that's because I just couldn't see very well through my tear-filled eyes. I buried my head into his shirt, the ever-so-familiar smell of tobacco and hay filling my nostrils. And when he sat me down, we were at the creek. He held me for a little bit longer before he let go and looked into my eyes. "You haven't changed a bit," he said softly. I just sobbed and nodded. "Wow, it's been so long. When your brother sent me away this morning, I thought I wasn't going to see you again. I don't blame him. The boy has every right to hate me, although I wish he wouldn't. I'm glad I stuck around for another few hours." I wiped the snot off my nose and brushed my hair out of my sweat-streaked forehead. "I hate you too, though." "Hear, hear," my father grunted with a chuckle. "You seemed pretty happy to see me just now." "Yeah, but... My voice trailed off and I began sobbing again. "I don't get it. You were gone for so long. Why were you gone so long? Why are you here now?" "Well," Arlo began, "after I left, it took me a while to find a place to stay. I found work at a ranch. It's about a 4-hour ride away from here, by horse. The ranch belongs to a really nice girl. When I started working there, Herb and I hit it off right away. She had a husband and had gotten divorced not long after too, and after what happened with Blanche, to spare you the details, we moved in together. That's how I got this horse too. And if I'm being honest, I was reminded of you and your brother just a couple of days ago when I was talking to someone about my life before coming to the ranch. I kinda had this epiphany. The ranch is close to the city, like, really damn close. It's just half an hour away from there, and I was thinking, I know you want to go to school and you got potential too. You're a smart kid. You could catch up with the other ones in no time. I know your brother won't want to come and he's too old now anyways, but if I could still take you with me, I could drive you to school. Sure, we'd have to get up early, but you're a farm kid. You're used to that. We'd make some money at the ranch too, more than enough to get you covered." When I tried talking to Benjamin about it, he got crazy mad. I thought my own son was going to shoot me for a moment there. Arlo laughed. "But wouldn't that just be perfect? You could go to school. We could spend time together again. Oh, and Joy, that's my girlfriend's name. She'd be really happy to meet you. I've told her all about you, and she's smart too. Not as smart as you, but clever. An all-around sweet lady. You're gonna love her. We could be like a family again. Man, I can't believe I didn't think of this sooner. And all because some guy just asked me about that other kid." "That other what?" I interrupted him. "Huh? The person who came to talk to you asked you about Jerry?" My eyes grew wide and I felt all the colour drain from my face. "Oh, right. That's what you named the little weirdo. Ben and Jerry. God damn." Arlo chuckled. Who? Who was it? How did they know about us?" I was almost screaming at this point. "Calm down, sugar. What's gotten into you?" "It was this dude, my age, a little younger maybe. Didn't tell me his name. He said he was a friend of Susanna. Asked me if I was her husband, and then about the baby. I just kinda told him what I knew. I mean, he knows the basics already if he's friends with Blanchy. I guess she was just too ashamed to go into detail and he got curious." I rose to my full, albeit not very imposing height and stared down at my father. In a very, very low voice I asked him, "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He just looked at me confusedly. "Someone is after Jerry. They're threatening us. We have no idea who, but we're certain they mean business. And you were the only one who told them about us. How could you do something like that? Telling a complete stranger about a hybrid infant? What was you thinking?" Arlo shrugged. "What do I know? They can take the little bastard for all I care." A wave of anger came flooding over me. "How dare you? He's just a kid. You... I fumbled for words but caught myself pretty quickly as over a year of suppressed rage rushed into my head like adrenaline through a vein. "I haven't seen you in over a year. You weren't even there on my birthday. You left your own kids behind. How dare you? even set foot on our land. You said it yourself, you forgot all about us. I can't believe I was actually glad to see you." I had to stop for a minute to catch my breath. "All this time, Ben's been watching out for us, all while you were riding horses with your new girlfriend." "It didn't look like watching out to me when you were just running alone through the woods just now." Arlo screamed by now. "Yeah, but that was because I was being stupid. Plus, you know no monster ever attacked us in the broad daylight. This was completely unexpected and not like it usually is. Usually, I would have been safe," I yelled back. "Ben protects me, and he's way better at it than you'll ever be." "Not that he'd have to try. It's 'cause I actually fucking mean something to him. He'd never leave me alone like you did." "Oh, so you're gonna stay here in bumfuck nowhere with your psycho brother, then come with me and get the chance to make something out of yourself? Is that what you're saying? How do you even talk to me? I'm your father, damn it," Arlo growled. My eyes narrowed, shrinking into small, hateful slits. "You're not my father," I said in a low voice. "Benjamin is." This left him speechless. He looked at me with wide eyes, his mouth agape. I gave him one last wrathful glare before turning around and walking back to the farm. When I opened the door, Ben was just coming downstairs, and he was holding a hammer and a few nails. "Hey there, did you have a good time? I just finished nailing the broken window shut. I've been thinking we should put up a fence around the farm, like one that shocks you when you touch it. You know, to keep out intruders." I looked up at him, and he saw my red swollen eyes and trembling lips. He immediately dropped his hammer and left over nails. He knelt down and I ran straight into his arms. I didn't have to tell him everything. Just a bit of stammering was enough for him to understand. He knew. He sent me off to take a bath and change into some clean clothes while he called Mum on the phone. And when I came back down, he told me she would come over the following day and bring us everything we needed. "She says she's going to stay a little longer this time," Ben explained. "Not just because of Jerry. She's coming to cheer you up. Don't worry too much," he added. "What about the monsters? Nothing like this has ever happened before, not by day. I think something has gotten them riled up. What if they're all going to start attacking now?" I asked nervously. "What if whoever's after Jerry is making them more aggressive somehow, you know, to get to us?" Ben gave me a reassuring smile. We'll find out who Arlo talked to. He's the one who's after Jerry, that's for sure. We'll figure out what his deal is, and together, as a family, we'll tear him a new one." I live on a farm out in the sticks. There are some strange creatures roaming our patch of land. Part 3. Let's get straight into that. It was a quiet evening. At least it was until Susanna Blanche came around. She let herself in to find Ben and me asleep on the couch in the living room. Jerry had curled up on top of my older brother's large stomach and dozed off as well. Ben had sat his shotgun next to the couch. This was his idea of cautionary measures, keeping a weapon close to you while taking a nap with 2 children. Susanna Blanche took the shotgun out of his reach before reaching into her pocket to retrieve her cell phone. She searched something along the lines of monster jump scare on YouTube, turned up the volume and played the short video. The loud screeching of some CGI demon startled the 3 of us awake. I screamed and Ben tried to grab his shotgun, realizing it wasn't there. He looked up to see the source of the noise, being our mother, who was laughing out loud at our terrified faces. He screamed at her for a solid minute before giving up, seeing as she could not stop laughing at her son's embarrassment. She hugged me and picked up Jerry, who had tumbled onto the couch, and she was still laughing when she led us into the kitchen to fetch herself a cup of coffee. To Susanna Blanche, there's nothing funnier than affectionately abashing her children. Even though I have mixed feelings about my mother's morals and behaviour, there is one thing I always will be willing to admit. Susanna Blanche Johnson is beautiful. She is tall and slim, with a preference for revealing clothing. Her and Arlo had made a good-looking couple before my father had gotten embittered and irascible. He had been really damn handsome too. When she had finished her coffee, Susanna Blanche opened her fridge to see rows of beer cans filling up the entire upper part of the fridge. My brother drives out of the city like once a month, and when he does, he brings back loads of that stuff. My mother turned to glare at Benjamin, who was holding up Jerry. He avoided her gaze. Susanna grabbed a bottle of milk from the fridge and closed it again. Leaning against it, she unscrewed the cap and started drinking from it. She downed half the entire bottle before letting out a small burp and wiping her mouth. She again turned to look at Ben. "You know alcohol isn't a solution, right?" she said. Her voice always had this alluring undertone many guys like so much. I remember Arlo once punching a buddy of his in the face when he told him he thought his wife's voice was sexy. It's a common misunderstanding that my mother speaking like that means she's interested in one she's talking to. But her voice is just always like that. Ben grunted. "I have a lot of problems, okay?" "Yeah, I can tell you the cheap beer won't solve any of them." Susanna emptied the milk bottle and threw it into the trash can in one swift motion. It clanked right in, and she threw her hands up. "Woo! You see that, kids?" She again wiped her mouth and sat down on one of the chairs. "Now, of course I'm not here to drink your milk. I'm here because my sweet Phoebe is sad." And before I knew it, she had grabbed me by the arm and sat me down in her lap. She began talking in that ridiculous voice people use when talking to babies and dogs. "You mummy's little girl, aren't you, sweetie? Arlo is such a big old arsehole for making you all sad. He can fuck right off, can't he? We don't want him around here no more, do we? God damn it, you're so cute." She pursed her lips and pinched my cheek. "Mummy's brought you a present. Mummy can't stand her baby to be sad, and so she went out and brought you something. You're going to be happy again in no time once you see what I've got for you," she sang. "Mum, I'm 12, I reminded her. "Sure you are, sweetheart," Susanna purred. She reached for her bag, which she had placed on the floor, and pulled out a small thin box. I opened it, and inside I found a shiny, sharp scalpel. I couldn't believe it. "Wow, that's actually awesome. Thank you so much, Mum," I said cheerfully, running my fingers along the grip. "Where'd you get something like that?" "That's my little secret, sugar. But remember, only use it on your brother when he's not conscious, or it'll hurt too much. You can't wait till he's drunk. Or knock him out with a hammer or something." I grinned, and my mother gave me a light kiss on the cheek. She sure could be great sometimes. Ben was watching us with a slight smile on his face. "Of course, I have not only come to cheer you up, upon hearing of the problem with my darling Jerry. I've done some digging, in my memory, that is. I think I know who could be interested in Jerry. See, something strange happened when I was giving birth to him," Susanna Blanche explained. Both Ben and I leaned forward in anticipation. "What?" my brother asked nervously. Neither of us had been in the hospital with our parents at the time. We were at home, waiting for them to come back with our new sibling. "Not even Arlo knows about this," my mother continued, only to pause right away. "Spit it out," I urged her. "Well, I was already in my labour pains and they were coming at a steady rate, but the little bugger wasn't quite ready yet, and so I laid her in a hospital bed, panting and groaning in pain. Having had you two kids before, I thought it'd be easier this time, but it was so much worse. In hindsight, it might have been because of Jerry being Jerry and not a normal baby. I didn't know that he was Franco's at the time. Oh right, Franco is the name of Jerry's..." "We know, we met him. Go on," Ben hurriedly explained. My mother gave him a strange look but continued anyways. "As I was saying, the pain was getting worse by the minute. Arlo didn't know what to do. He panicked. We ran out of the ice and he quickly went to get some. He hadn't been out the door for more than 5 seconds when this other guy came in. He was around my age, dressed all in black. Looked awfully serious. I tried to sit up but failed to do so. My belly's weight was keeping me down. I half expected this guy to have gone into the wrong room, but instead of turning back, he went straight up to me and halted by my bedside. He stared down at me, and he was handsome, I guess, but he had eyes like a dead fish. "Excuse me?" I asked, not knowing what else to say. He put a finger to his lips and said in a very soft, low voice, "Don't speak. There's no need to. I'm here to witness the birth of your child." "The fuck?" I replied. "You are Eknida, the mother of monsters." What?" You have produced a giant that grows stronger and larger by the day, like the Fenris wolf, and after that, an estranged child with a twisted curiosity. But now, you are soon to give birth to the most unholy creature, a child born from sin, from betrayal, the ultimate blasphemy. I was getting pissed at this point. I mean, the hell was this freak talking about? Seeing as I was mattress bound, I could do nothing but move my arms. I made good use of them though, hitting him square across the face. The fucker didn't even flinch. He even smiled when the blood started dripping out of his nose. He reached out and placed his hand onto my colossal stomach. As he did, something began to writhe inside of me. I could feel it coming. My baby was about to come. I screamed, partly for help and partly in pain. The stranger pulled back his hand and ran out of the door. Only seconds later, Arlo and the nurses came in. I still remember how much it hurt. It was torture. Way worse than squeezing out you two. The nurse screamed at me to keep pushing, but after the first minute or something, I already felt like I was completely exhausted and drained. And to be honest, I thought I was going to die for the moment. It hurt so much. I wouldn't even wish for old Arlo to experience that sort of pain. Well, the little one finally came out and you know what happened then. I never saw that man again. I know he did something to initiate the birth. Maybe he even made it extra painful or something. It felt like my insides were torn open. God, it must have been the same guy. He wants Jerry. I don't know why, but he wants him. My mother wore a deep frown by the time she'd ended her story. I got off from her lap and put my scalpel into its narrow box, which I tucked away in one of the large pockets of my dress. Judging from the way you describe his speech, it might be from some sort of religious organization. What he said doesn't add up though. It's all just a ton of weird stuff mixed together. Blasphemy, sin, ex-nihilo, and the Fenris wolf? The first two sound kinda Christian, but ex-nihilo and Fenrir are actually creatures from Greek and Norse mythology, respectively, I explained. How do you know stuff like that? Ben asked. Because I pick up a book from time to time. God damn, I replied, slightly annoyed. What matters is, whoever he was, he has known about Jerry even before he was born. How is that possible? Susanna Blanche shrugged. No clue. I mean, I didn't even know the kid was Franco's until, well, it was pretty obvious when he came out. What I'm saying is, I didn't tell anyone, and I doubt Franco did. You guys said you met him? He's not the kind to give out information to some religious weirdo, is he? Absolutely not, Ben stated. He's a good guy. A bit of a pushover, but a great guy. Pushover? He sure wasn't like that when I knew him, my mother remarked. Either way, we have to ask ourselves whether this mystery man is actually human. He might be something else, I said. So what if he isn't? Ben said, puffing out his chest. We've dealt with crap like that before. Maybe he's not dangerous. Maybe he's just pretentious. The moment he finished that sentence, a frantic knocking sound came from the front door. The three of us exchanged concerned glances. Susanna picked up Jerry, and we went for the door. On the way, Ben grabbed his shotgun that had been laying on the floor, cocking it and raising it to the shoulder level in one swift motion. I felt my fingers inching closer to the box in my pocket. My brother grabbed the door handle and pulled the door open. Outside, panting and in obvious distress, was Franco. His usually soft fur was caked in mud, and his hooves had left behind a trail of dirt on our porch. Ben let out a sigh of relief and lowered the shotgun. Well, speak of the devil, Susanna Blanche remarked. Franco didn't even seem to notice his former lover, though. His eyes were glazed as his trembling fingers kept cramping around the shorter strands of fur on his thighs, as if he needed to distract himself by pulling on his own hair. I stepped forward, reached up and put my fingers on his wrist to feel his pulse. It was racing. He was still trying to catch his breath, hindering him from speaking. I held onto his hand and led him inside. He didn't refuse. He gave me a thankful look out of his large round eyes, and then he noticed Jerry, who was happily resting in his mother's arms. Oh, thank God he's okay, Franco cried out. Of course, he's been with us all this time, dude. What happened? Benjamin asked, visibly concerned. I thought whoever was after the little one got to you. I thought because... Take your time, I said. I went to fetch him a glass of water, which he gulped down in one swig, and he finally seemed to calm down. In a stern, still slightly shaken voice, he said, "There's a dead body in your backyard." All of us except Franco ran outside, and by the time we reached the backyard, we could already see him. He was propped up on a swing, hanging from the tree next to our back door. He had been gutted like a pig. His shirt was stained with his own blood. His stomach had been carved open. Some of his bowels were hanging down from it. I didn't care to find out which. As I stepped closer, I could see that his throat had been slit. I didn't cry. I felt tears well up in my eyes, but I didn't cry. The smell of his blood was fresh and strong. It completely covered the pleasant, familiar smell of the tobacco and hay. I stood, eyes transfixed, onto his corpse, and behind me I could hear my mother gag, and shortly after she threw up onto the ground. Jerry had started to cry, and Ben had not said anything, but I could feel his hand on my shoulder. "Phoebe," he said softly into my ear. I shook my head. "How?" I whispered. "We were right inside. He hasn't been dead for long. Look at his skin. It's still so clean, and we were right inside." I tried to inch closer to the corpse. I reached out to touch it, but before I could, I felt my body being lifted from the ground, and shortly after, I found myself in my older brother's tight embrace. He carried me back onto the porch where he sat me down. Susanna had followed close behind, and she still looked a bit sick. "What do we do?" she asked in a low voice, not to anyone in particular, but everyone. Ben swallowed and looked out over the fields. "We have to barricade ourselves." Wow. Absolutely awesome stuff there. Really enjoying this series. That's 1 to 3. We've still got 4 more parts to come, guys, but I've run out of time, I'm afraid, today with the school runs and everything else that's going on at the moment with Christmas. As ever, though, you know the drill. Please do let us know down below in the comments what you thought. Please do like and share. It really does help with the channel and our community further. And of course, don't forget to hashtag TeamFEAR. As ever, a huge thank you to the author, Girl from the Crypt, over on Reddit No Sleep. Take time to check out her wonderful Reddit, of which I'll leave a link in the description box below. I hope you're all well and happy, guys, and had a wonderful week, and looking forward to a relaxing weekend with family and friends. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.